him. The shooter is identified as a suspicious person near the AGR building. Does that sound right to what you're understanding of the timeline?
Yes, sir.
And so at least some point, somebody had seen him by 5:10 p.m. That's an hour before the shooting. They adjudicated he was suspicious. And in testimony before the committees of Congress, they indicated to us that, when I say they, I'm talking Cheadle, Rowe, and Ray, the directors and interim directors of Secret Service and FBI. They indicated to us that there's a distinction between a suspicious person and a threat. And so you have a suspicious individual, you have a threat, there's an interim category as well. What's that interim category?
In our line of communications from a SWAT point of view and from a tactical point of view, our escalation of people that we encounter starts out as a suspicious person, then goes to a person of interest, and then from that level upgrades to what we refer to as a threat. And each one of those warrant a different response.
So the actual shooting takes place right about 6:11 p.m. So an hour elapses. How soon after the first identification of the shooter, which is at 5:10 p.m., did you? Well, before we get there, let's lay the foundation. What were you doing that day?
I was in a counter sniper role with one of my teammates in the southwest quadrant of the event center. Distance-wise, it was approximately 238 yards southwest of the podium and approximately 348 south-southwest of the shooter's final firing position.
And so he was not ever in your sector of responsibility?
Nor in my visual, nor sector, nor visual. I never had visual.
How soon after he's identified were you given information that, or did you hear information that there was a suspicious character that you should be alerted to?
Believe those text messages came across, and just to give some background on the text message tactics. So in this type of event, as tactical officers, we try to build redundancy in communications because it's so critical. We start out in a primary role, which would have been our radios that day, communicating on a designated channel amongst all the tactical operators. Because we were in support of the host agency, which would have been the Butler, the Emergency Services Unit, we also were running a secondary channel that was our local Washington Regional SWAT team channel. On top of that, the snipers and counter snipers, or I should just say the counter snipers, there were no snipers involved in our chat, had set up another chat to be able to provide any type of pictures or any type of relevant media or anything like that that we'd have been able to crosstalk.
So did you ever see any pictures were any pictures ever sent to you?
They were. The pictures came across the chat at approximately 5:38.
So about 30 minutes after the shooter, then at that time he was a suspicious individual.
That's correct.
And when he gets up on the roof and he's crawling across the roof, is that what threat assessment would normally be made of that guy at that point?
Sure. I think it's important to mention that, from the time the original pictures were taken, the comment of him possibly having a rangefinder or that he was confirmed to have a rangefinder at that point would have automatically escalated him in our protocols from a suspicious person into a person of interest. And that would have warranted some type of either investigatory detention or a stop and question at that point when the rangefinder became a factor.
Ben, Mr. Shaver, at what point in that hour or before were you notified of the rangefinder, the use of a rangefinder?
Within minutes of the original information being passed. So I would say shortly after 5:38 p.m. or 17:38.
Thank you so much.
My time's expired. You'll bet.
Mr. Biggs, Mr. Schaefer, thank you so much. At this point, we will turn it over for 10 minutes with the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Prince. I know you have a bit of a public profile, but I'm not sure everybody here understands the depth of your experience here. What was the name of the organization that you founded, sir?
Blackwater.
How many employees did you have at Blackwater when you ended up selling the company?
At peak of about 3,500 Americans deployed doing everything from very high-end executive security to aviation and training.
3,500, that's it's a pretty large company.
Brigade size.
Yeah. With other protective companies that did executive protection around the world, how did you guys rack and stack? Were you one of the largest companies, one of the smaller companies?
I'd say we were the largest doing that. We never really intended to be in the security business. I started after the SEAL teams and built a training facility. SEAL teams had been using private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done one on an industrial scale. And started, and then as the demand signal of 2 wars and all the gaps created by trying to take a conventional military into a counterinsurgency created a lot of demand signal, and so we responded by providing a lot of executive security and ended up doing most of the diplomatic security work for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Though there's some similarities between what the Secret Service does and what you had to do overseas, there are definitely some differences.
Sure.
Correct.
In fact, we interacted with the Secret Service whenever the president or some other senior person was coming over. In fact, before we took over security first for Paul Bremer in Iraq, the Secret Service came over to do a study if they wanted to handle it, and they didn't want to touch it at all because they are used to being able to shut down everything and create their own bubble. You can't do that in an active war zone, so that job fell to us, and we grew into that. It was, and that expertise also led us to doing a lot of training for other State Department programs where we'd had at least a dozen countries send their Secret Service equivalents that protected their presidents, and whether that's Lebanon, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of places with active threats and very active, whether it's Sicarios or Hezbollah, we prepped those units to face that kind of threat. And, you know, we did 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured.
I want you to repeat that, sir. Did you guys ever lose a protectee?
No, we
No.
did not.
Thank you. You said something interesting on an episode of Sean Ryan that I saw a couple weeks ago. You said, thank God it was a 20-year-old kid and not a 10-man Hezbollah team. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure, because the fact that a 20-year-old kid could get his drone in the air, could get himself into a firing position only 140 yards away. 140 yards is point-blank range. My then 12-year-old son could have made that shot. Yep. And thank God that 20-year-old aimed at a headshot at President Trump, because if he'd aimed center mass, President Trump would probably be dead, because I don't think he was wearing plates. He wasn't wearing any kind of body armor that would have stopped that rifle round. And a 78-year-old man taking a gunshot wound to the upper chest is not going to go well. A Hezbollah team or ISIS or you name the terrorist organization that actually knows what they're doing would have been successful that day. And the Secret Service was nearly defeated by a 20-year-old, and we all, including Donald Trump, literally dodged a bullet that day.
So I want to double down on that real quick. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, is the Secret Service in its current form and leadership able to stop a threat like that?
President Trump was definitely deprived of resources that day for whatever their political reason. They had 1/3 the amount of agents covering him as were covering Jill Biden in the same region at an indoor event. She had 12 post holders covering her. Again, no statutory or constitutional authority for the First Lady. Donald J. Trump was had 4 Secret Service agents assigned. And I think even when you look at the debacle of a failure of the advance team to actually secure the perimeter and to deny the obvious sniper hotel locations where a bad guy is going to set up from, to the complete lack of coordination and communication, not communicating with the local law enforcement, not taking the radios of local law, come on, to even when shots were fired, the clumsy, unprofessional way of getting the protectee off the X, there was catastrophic failure across the entire enterprise.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you, at this point, have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There are so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. Anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Eric just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA-level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what, I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of a courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio? I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, it was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Eric knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong. That you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail. Because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this under oath if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. It has nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
My last question is for Ben Schaefer. In your opinion, Mr. Schaefer, why were counter snipers in AGR that had access to the entire building, from what we've been told, not able to see crooks crawling up the roof when we've seen several videos from the ground level taken by bystanders and individuals not even tasked to be doing security? were able to photograph crooks wearing no camouflage, crawling on a white roof? Why were the snipers, the local snipers, not able to see crooks and dispatch of him?
I can only pass this knowledge through secondhand communications. I was not privy to that location or to survey that ahead of time. Although I have spoken to those individuals that were placed in that room that day, based on the depth of the room, their placements, and the limited field of view that those windows provided. They were pretty narrow, as most standard residential windows are held. The angle was too hard for them to see that far to their east, which if they would have been facing south.
Thank you so much. Appreciate my colleague Eli. With that, I'll turn over 10 minutes to the Honorable Matt Gaetz.
Mr. Prince, you're one of the people I trust most about global affairs. You're constantly assessing the threat environment and intelligence. And I guess my question to you is, because this has been laid bare and these weaknesses have been exposed, are you concerned that we're likely to face not another Crooks, but perhaps a threat like you described, a team from a foreign adversary, a terrorist organization, trying to expose and exploit the weaknesses that now we've seen?
I am very concerned. The inability of the Secret Service or the U.S. government writ large to adjust, to learn a painful lesson from that failure and actually make concrete changes. Because again, the fact that a 20-year-old nearly killed Donald Trump, and the failure to adapt to even yesterday's technology, let alone tomorrow's. And when you see the step change of the ability to deliver precision fires at extended ranges, the lessons being learned on the battlefield of Ukraine, the ability for small units to deliver devastating precision fire onto any target, whether it's the White House, whether it's a motorcade, whether it's a president outside or even inside somewhere, is significant, and I don't think they have any idea what's coming at them.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process, because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense, how does that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. Here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says 50 to 60 times, hey, again, this widget has a defect, and if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So when the 51st time you tell the product blows up, the CEO's gonna say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel to this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. We're not doing counter-sniper teams. We're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those 3 people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really, what if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're gonna rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the kind of the guts to take this on. Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter-surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter-sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site? So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do
But
their
see,
job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, we might need more, and they were discouraged from even making those requests, so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because like you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees,
Yes.
right? Of all kind of different profiles and different, I guess, priority, for lack of a better term. And so, like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, beefed up substantially?
I think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise. It just wasn't. I never once, working for President Clinton, Bush, and Obama, had anyone even remotely implicate a political motive for any decision whatsoever. However, from the commentary directed at some of the agents in charge of the Donald Trump detail, which I have heard about, clearly, it appears that for the first time in American history, we have a Secret Service that is making decisions that may not be all political, but may have a political tinge to them. So what you're saying, I would love to say, Congressman, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I tell you with a pure heart, and I'm being absolutely candid, I have no skin in this game. I don't work there anymore. I am not their PR guy. I run my own business. I absolutely believe Donald Trump and an enhanced security posture he should have had would have made him look more presidential, would have facilitated the logistical operation of him traveling. I think they were concerned about optics and making him look like a big shot or whatever, word you want to throw out there. And they were making some of these decisions based purely on grade school level politics.
I
and
don't want to
someone got
believe
killed.
that, but I didn't want to
Neither
believe
do
it
I.
with the FBI either. I didn't want to believe it with the NIH either. I mean, a lot of these agencies that have been I think, subject to political capture. We want to think of them as above that. And we all spend time around Secret Service. We're inspired by their patriotism and the willingness you have to literally take a bullet for someone if necessary. But just like in the military, just like at the FBI, I worry about the political capture happening at headquarters, and then that culture informing decisions in a way that's very damaging to the country. So what Mr. Bongino just said ought to be the most important work of the United States Congress, to figure out if these decisions were run-of-the-mill incompetence that you've got to deal with the better tech and the better processes and the better HR and getting rid of the DEI, but if it's something even darker and more devious than that, that must be rooted out, because what we've seen at these other agencies of government is it does not cure itself. It has to be excised, and that investigation is the most important work we can do. I thank you guys for leading this effort, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. With that, I just want to go first to you, Mr. Prince. You said you roughly have about 3,500 at the peak of Blackwater, correct?
That's right.
Secret Service currently has approximately 7,000, approximately. What was your highest annual revenue, if you don't mind me asking, give or take, for that many operations?
Ooh, for that, the protective mission was about 2,500 to 2,800, and that revenue would have been around $600 million.
So $600 million for
And
that.
again, that's deploying in a war zone where 41 of our men, my men, were killed
So
in
safe to
action.
say, if you had $3.3 billion allocated to you, you could have done some even more miraculous things with resource and assets, correct?
I'll give a simple comparison. Around 2005, George W. Bush wanted to grow the size of the Border Patrol. I remember being called to a congressional hearing then because they compared what it would cost us to train a new CBP agent versus what the federal government was going to take. And our figure came in at 1/3. And their figure was actually higher than sending someone to Harvard for 4 years, and that's to train a guy for 4 months. That's it.
And-
So it's, the federal government blows money. Like I
That's
said in my
exactly my
testimony,
point. And
we
my
have-
point is that the failed metric of government, whereby the more we spend, the better outcome we receive, is a flawed and failed measure, which is why we're at $36 trillion in deficit. And the reason I use that $3 billion, as you know, Mr. Prince, is because that's the actual amount that appropriators have allocated to the Secret Service, which means that, to Dan Bongino's comment, they shouldn't be utilizing past equipment to serve tomorrow. They should have more than enough assets and resources in place with a $3 billion budget. Would you not agree?
Certainly.
And I want to go to you, Mr. Bongino. I want to point out some things, because culture failure, as my colleague has pointed out and others, I want to mention a couple of things. August 14, 2024 is reported failure that a Secret Service agent abandoned her post without permission to breastfeed child before Donald Trump was scheduled to arrive in North Carolina. August 12, 2024, it was reported that a Secret Service special agent who was an official site agent for the July 13 Butler PA rally is under investigation for posting videos and photos for protective assignments to social media. July 27, 2024, a Secret Service agent covered the security camera of a local salon in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, before an event featuring Kamala Harris, where the salon was closed, but opened it up without approval and utilizing restrooms for an hour and a half while the building's security alarm was going off. July 2nd, 2023, it was reported that a former Secret Service Director Cheadle and senior agency leader sought to destroy the cocaine found in the White House in July of 2024. The evidence was not destroyed due to pushback in individuals in the Secret Service Forensic Service divisions. May 2024, a man enters the U.S. Secret Service Miami field office through a propped open door and was not removed from the building until the following morning. April 24, 2024, a special agent assigned to Harris's detail had a mental breakdown where the agent is reported to have physically attacked the commanding agent in charge at the base after verbal disputes with other agents. Sometimes during 2023 and 2024, at least 2 people breached President Obama's Hawaii residence. Though the president wasn't there at the residence, his 2 daughters were on premise at the time. April 2023, a drunken intruder entered the home of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the middle of the night. The man was able to gain access to Sullivan's home despite 24/7 Secret Service protective services in Sullivan due to the sensitive nature of his position. Now, I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Bongino, where you said none of these problems are new. I think just the list of those that I've just mentioned shows that this is not a new problem, but has existed for quite a while. And with a $3 billion annual budget, I would think that we would start evaluating those mistakes to make those corrective actions. Would you agree with the things that I've listed, with the budget that is allocated, that there should be a much better provision of security for protectees than what you're seeing today?
Oh, there's zero dispute about this. You know, Mr. Prince's company had accountability. People fire him and find a new company if he lost a protectee. You can't fire the Secret Service. 18 U.S.C. 3056, they're obligated to protect him. The Secret Service has a culture problem, Congressman. I was an instructor in our training academy in Beltsville, Maryland for 3 years. I ran operations over there, taught investigations over there, spent a little time in the control tactics unit. I was there for 3 years. Unfortunately, I can't count on one hand, I would need probably two and toes as well, to count how many agents who could not meet even basic protective functioning skills and criminal investigative skills, but who met other criteria completely irrelevant to job performance, who were pushed through and told with a wink and a nod, this woman or man needs to graduate. Well, why? They're clearly incompetent. Every instructor who's encountered this person has said this person's incompetent, to the point where in judgment drills, they're killing the protectee in the judgment drills. That's kind of not what we do. You're not supposed to shoot the protectee yourself in a simunition drill. And you would say things, you would hear things, excuse me, from special agents in charge, and I encourage you all to look into this, how the training center works and how they graduate students, where they would say, well, that person files a lot of complaints, like EEO complaints. Okay, well, are they real? That sounds serious. Sounds like a serious thing to me. I take that stuff seriously. And they would say, well, they file them enough that it's become a nuisance and they're not really legitimate, but because this person files a lot of complaints, we need to graduate them. Some of those people now, matter of fact, not just a few, but many, are out on protective assignments now. And again, this
So what
is
you're
not.
saying is that DEI plays a major role, not meritocracy, with
major
regards to the current culture that has been fostered.
No,
in.
not a. No, the major role. The Secret Service right now is dominated by DEI. It's not a role. It's the role. You ask agents on the president.
And I think
you
that
wanna
everyone's heard me say before, DEI equals DIE. You know, DEI stands for didn't earn it, and
Well,
we
it
need to
did
be
for
very
Corey
cautious in how
Comparator.
we
So
do this.
ask his family.
Correct. I just want to move on briefly with the time. Mr. Schaefer, I just need you to kind of confirm the no's. And when I say confirm the no's, you'll understand. Didn't take the communication platform that was given by local forces, correct?
That's correct.
Didn't take the surveillance drone offered by local forces, is that correct?
That is correct.
Didn't show up for the morning briefing to ensure that last-minute planning could be accounted for.
That is correct.
Didn't take any necessary measures to talk to the Kubota dealer, who was 400 yards away to the 12 o'clock direct line of sight, to even see whether or not they could gain access to that rooftop or talk to the owner.
That is correct.
Did not access the water tower, which has the highest vantage point, and provide oversight that would have also looked at the AGR building.
That is correct.
You know, I'm looking at all this and I'm noting a lot of no's, of things that didn't happen. And unfortunately, because we've allowed this to go on for weeks and weeks, we're now going to be faced with the fact that they're going to be memorializing all these documents to reflect July 9, July 10, July 11, dotting I's, crossing T's that wasn't actually going forward. Now, I want to ask you something, Mr. Prince, because you know this all too well about counterterrorism operations. We know for a fact that we have an open border with roughly 10 million people that's come across. We know that cartels are cheering on President Joe Biden as the employee of the month every single month. When you think about 2018, where you had $500 million in revenue from cartel, to now $13+ billion in revenue. If you knew a president was coming in that would put things like remain in Mexico back in place, secure our borders, and cut your revenue, you have the training, you have the assets, you have the revenue, would you deem that person as a threat and want to take that individual out?
It's a very simple answer, because you can see what they did in the last Mexican election that just happened a few months ago. They killed 27 conservative candidates, assassinated while campaigning.
And noting that you had the successful counterterrorism operation that eliminated the shadow master, Qasem Soleimani of Quds Force, as well as for Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, who led the Iranian proxy militias of Iraq, would you deem that as them declaring a fatwa to increase your threat profile as an individual protectee?
Certainly the Iranians would see it as a risk worth taking.
And you also note that a question that needs to be asked of the FBI is that on July 12th, a 46-year-old Pakistani male named Burjan was actually captured, who had also plotted assassination against President Donald J. Trump and 35 elected officials. The question is how did you think an individual who's on a terrorist watch list, landed in Houston, Texas, was questioned by the FBI, and I would love to hear his answers because they must have been spectacular, and then released, noting that this individual flew from Pakistan to Iran for 4 days prior to this